Hello! This week I'm going to show you how I make a conical shaped bolo tip. Something along this line. And then I'm also going to go over making a bead that we'll finish the tip with. Let's get started. Today you'll just need a couple of hammers. These are the two that I'm using. Some paper, like an index card, something a little bit heavier than like typewriter paper or copy paper. A ruler, pencil, and then you need one of these blocks. I think it's called a Swage block. I'm terrible about remembering the exact names of things. And I'm using 24 gauge copper, so fairly thin because we want to be able to form it easily. And then I'm going to use also some 24 gauge silver for the bead and just do kind of a mixed metal tip. So I like to fold my paper in half. That way I am not trying to cut two parallel lines at the same angle. I just get it done in one shot. And I don't use a template. There's probably some out there for making cones. I just kind of wing it and do a trial and error from the paper pattern, and then even a copper mock-up will show me if I need to adjust the pattern. So I'm going to do almost the length of this paper. And it's just a slight angle. You're not going vertical, it's just a little bit of an angle. And then also, depending on the bolo cord you're using, you have to adjust your pattern to each one. Okay, so then I just kind of fold this paper, try to soften it up a little so that I can form it into a cone. Kind of see what we have. So then I can fold it and take the cord that I'm using and see if that's going to work. And that would be nice and snug. Okay. Okay, let's try this one. Let me measure it and see what we ended up with. So I have about 15 millimeters across the top. And about 8 millimeters at the smallest point. So let's try it. We'll mock one up in copper and see if we need to change it. Okay. So that's what we're going to start with. I'm going to start a curve in this just a little bit with the round nose pliers. Just slightly. And then we'll set it into the largest shape here. And then using this end of the hammer, I'm going to start hammering the length of it. Moving over to the next smaller. Then I'm bringing it up to the next smallest, and then I'll start using the flat end of the hammer. And you just want to go slowly and try to close up the cone. And take your time because it could twist on you. And you just want to evenly fold this. Get closer. And once you start getting really close like this, you can almost come in and hammer from the top. But I'm kind of rocking it side to side. I'm going to flip it. Just going slow is the key to this, and really watching to make sure it's folding evenly. And here's a point. You can kind of see where, maybe not, my edges almost were a little too pointed. Like I could maybe cut this a little bit straighter right here. Not having so much of an angle, it could have come down a little bit straighter. That little corner is kind of wanting to overlap right here. But it's not a problem. We could just kind of pull that out a little bit. Yeah, that worked. Just kind of pulled it out a little bit. Okay. Now we can go over to the soldering bench and close that up. I'm going to brush some flux all along that seam. And I'll be using a piece of medium solder. I did a second cone that I didn't take as much time with, just to show you how it can twist. You can see the seam isn't nice and straight like this first one. It'll kind of curve. And we can kind of hammer the shape a little bit, but yeah, you definitely want to take your time and get that nice straight seam. I've got a sandpaper wheel on here, and I'm just going to sand up the seam a little bit. So I just sanded all the way around it, cleaned up any solder that got in the way, and looking pretty good. I'm just going to make that a little more round with the dapping block again. And we could put this in a vise and then just kind of tap it lightly at the top. I'm going to try and just hold it. Yeah. And just tap it with my nylon mallet. And it kind of stretches it back in shape. There. I'm going to give it a little hand sand with a light grit sandpaper. And you could have used a file or your flex shaft with a sandpaper disc to clean that up. My flex shaft motor kind of conked out on me last month, and I haven't got it fixed yet. So you can see it's not perfectly smooth. There's little kind of not much of a dent, but it's just not perfect. But you could, if that really bothers you, you could take the rubber mallet and just kind of tap on it and work the shape a little bit more at this point. You could probably fix a lot of those just with sandpaper and filing, but to me that doesn't really bother me. I kind of like that real handmade look that you can tell that was hammered and not something machine made. But I will tap it a little bit and see just how straight I can get that. It's not bad, and this actually was the cone that I didn't take as much time on and had the twisted seam. So I'll hammer out the other one and sand it and see how that one looks. I'm going to set this one back in the block and just tap it and spin it and roll it and kind of get that roundness back into it. And this is the one that had the straight seam that I really took my time forming, and it is a lot straighter, I think. It's really slight, it's hard to tell, but this one does seem a lot smoother, and this one has a little more kind of curve in it that you can see. Let's check and see how it fits with the cord I'm using. That's pretty snug. I might have to either change my pattern a little bit or, well, it works perfect on this one. Oh, I think I used another pattern on this one. That's why. Okay. Yep, that fits perfect. Okay, so we have 2 matching cones now. Let's make a couple of beads to put on the ends of these. I'm going to use 24 gauge sterling, and I'm going to use the disc cutter from Swanstrom. I've really been liking using this, and we're going to use the little center punch, or that finds the center. That way we know the hole is in perfect alignment with our disc. I'm going to draw 2 circles on the silver, the size that I want to make for the half of the bead that's going directly onto this cone. And then with the crosshairs on the ruler, I will roughly figure out where the center is, and then I'm going to drill a hole. Not the size that I want for this, because when we dap it'll distort and get larger, so I'm going to make a smaller hole. And I will take this to the drill press and be right back. Okay. I've got the center hole drilled. It's my starter hole. And I'm going to take it over here to the corresponding disc. I'm going to try out the centering. It should be enough of a hole that will find it. Okay, got it. A little blade butter on this before we punch. There we go. So that gives me a disc with a perfectly centered hole now. And now I can dap these 2 halves. And I'll do it just like I did the other 2 halves. I'll move to the smaller size, and then I'll sand the bottoms flat. Okay, so now I need to make this hole large enough for our cones to fit into them. So that's quite a bit bigger. I mean, I could have had the starter hole bigger than this. You just have to remember that when you dap it, it will become larger. So I'm just gonna file with the round file until I get it to fit this diameter. Probably got about 1/8 of an inch sticking up inside of that half dome. I'm going to spray some liquid flux right into the center of these. Warm it up, and then I will drop a piece of medium solder down there. So I have the top half of the bead soldered onto the cone. So now I'm going to take it back to the soldering bench, and I can set these up like they were in the block and then solder the top half on. I'm going to brush some flux on the edge. Picking up a couple of easy solder chips. And if you have easy paste solder, you could easily just rub a little bit of that paste solder on the edge here. I'm just going to heat that till they start to melt slightly, the solder. And then I can set the top half on. This is a little more difficult than just making the beads, where you can stand them up on a stainless steel rod. And I could have soldered the beads together on this and then embedded it into the brick and then had the cone soldered last. Either way. Now I have both bead tips soldered on to our cones. I'm just going to sand these a little bit and clean up the edge of the bead. Just went around the seam a little bit with the sander, and now I'm just going to hand sand the rest. I've just tested the cord in these, and I've got a really nice fit on both of these. So you could, if you wanted to at this point, stop and put some epoxy in here, but I like to cut into the tops a little bit and make some tabs that I can then pinch onto the leather cord. So that's going to be our next step. I gave both of these a quick polish, but I am going to cut some little tabs at the top so that I can push those into the leather cord. I'm going to take a triangle file and just start some grooves. I'm going to cut them just a little bit deeper with the saw. And then I go back with the triangle file again. And then I'm going to take the file and just kind of round those tips out just a little bit so they're not a sharp edge. And then I'll do that to the other cone and we'll be ready to put them on the cord. I've squeezed out a little bit of super glue because I like to put just a small amount on there for extra security. And then I'm ready to put this inside. And that fits really well. And then we can use some nylon coated pliers and give those tabs a little squeeze. It just closes right in on the cord. Then I also like to just tap it with the nylon mallet a little bit. Let's grab that. Right there on my bench top. Okay. Yep. And there we go. We've got one tip set. And I like to push it in there as far as I can. And then move it up here and tap. There we have two conical shaped bolo tips with the bead. I think those came out really nice. I like the copper and silver together on these. So I guess I'd better make a bolo to go with it. But that will have to wait. I'm going to take a couple of weeks off during this winter break and clean the studio up. It is a horrible sight. So I'll take a couple of weeks off, do some cleaning, and I'll see you back here in the new year. Thanks for watching.